Hello, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Conservation Stories. This is a podcast that is hosted by the Sand Hill Area Research Association, or as we call it, SARA. And this podcast focuses on people that are pioneering new ideas, or people that have been here for a long time, or just anyone we think that would be helpful to our listeners in our region, and we want you to know about it. So today we have invited Chris Grotegut to visit with us, and Chris is a couple of generations here in our area and longtime farming family vet. And I'd love for you, Chris, to give us some background on you and what you're doing these days. Thanks.
Okay. Good morning, Tillery. What my focus is, first of all, I am an agriculture producer and a veterinarian in Dudensing County, Texas, southwest of Amarillo, little town called Hereford, Texas, known for a few cattle that are being held here. And
Cow capital of the world, I think, is what that title is.
Self-proclaimed.
Oh man, I'm so
Self-proclaimed.
disappointed. Okay.
Well, I have some friends in some other states, particularly in Nebraska, that says there's a lot of little feedlots that don't get counted.
Oh, that's probably true. Probably true. Yes.
And so we wonder where they show up from sometimes. But no, to get back on our focus of what we're at, our farm, we have a farming and ranching operation northeast of Hereford, Texas. And we've been here a long time. We've gone down the road of irrigation. We still irrigate some. We're not anti-irrigation, but we are anti the idea of running out of water. And I think a lot of people are anti the idea of running out of water. And we have also woken up to the realization that our community is very, very important to us or to whomever lives in this land in the centuries to come. And we have to remind ourselves this is relatively new country. So to run into the problems that we have here with water at the point we're at, it kind of happened historically rather quickly, considering most irrigation, early 1900s, there was a little bit of irrigation that started, and the boom in the plains did not really happen until post-World War II, going into the drought of the 50s. Prior to that, the banking community thought irrigation was a negative, not a positive. And then the 1950s drought came, and it became a positive, not a negative, to have irrigation. Hence, the technology came forth over time, and we've gone down this road. Where our focus has been, I serve as an advisor to the county committee for High Plains Water District, and I serve on the Region O water planning group, which is the Llano Estacado group out of Lubbock. We look a lot of times at thinking about, on one side, looking at water policy for the region, the other side, looking at water planning. And it's evident that the small and mid-sized communities are behind on their water planning needs. And in our works on our farms, we've learned that you can balance usage with recharge and still have be able to maintain a good stable water supply. And part of that is through things like conversion of cropland to grassland, restoring playa lakes to the full function, getting them back to being functional, where when it rains, the water doesn't sit on the surface of the playa for months at a time. It goes down in a matter of weeks, days to weeks. So that water table's going back, the water's going back down. Our eyeballs are probably our best monitoring gauge on that as far as what's happening at the playa level. And transducers and measurement tapes to measure deep well water levels is our other best measurement tool for what's going on below the ground. And so when we did that, as we've done some of that work, and we've been so blessed with having the water district curious in what we're doing. The former person who just recently retired, Ray Eads, was our unbiased documenter of what we were doing on our properties. And so it gave us some validity that there are positive ways forward here. It is not a doom and gloom story, but it's not going to be easy or cheap to solve. So what we've come up with, the concept, we're working on the concept, and we're trying to engage as many people as possible. this concept of getting the community together to plan and look at data, following suit of what LaDonna Clayton with the Oglala Land and Water Conservancy in New Mexico is doing, with her backing with the Department of Defense, which is something most communities don't have. That's a huge advantage for them, but that doesn't mean we don't have our own advantages. And so to kind of plan and look at where the water is and try to identify viable ways to have the community study those areas where the water is. And then a couple of different ways you can go about it. One is you bring in the water district data, you bring in the USGS data, you work with Texas Water Development Board, and work with probably an engineering firm. I mean, at Region O, there's Park Hill and Lubbock, and we deal with at Region O, we deal with HDR, and HDR does a great job. Freeze and Nichols is also. I mean, those are all three pretty prominent names that come up in the water cycle planning. And the big thing is identify the location, and then we've got to figure a way to preserve it and to compensate the producers for helping us preserve it, because they're very important. That land stewardship is very, very critical to the outcomes we're going to have. And getting them on board and realize they're truly a part of the community, and the culture is critical. The agriculture, the culture of agriculture is critical to these communities, because sometimes the best export we have are the kids growing up there and watching what they do across the different careers that they go into. We've looked at a couple different concepts, and in the discussion that Lynn Tate and I had in August, this discussion of groundwater CRP came up, and it's something that's kind of resounded with people. We've gotten a lot of producers like the idea of not irrigating when they realize they will be compensated for it. And basically, Tillery, it's a U.S. We're trying to communicate with state senators and state congressmen and U.S. congressmen, and we need to reach out to some U.S. senators yet to look at this concept and figure out if it's a viable program. But the flip on it being, the old grass CRP from 1985 was an idling of land and a parking of the land in grass, looking at strictly from a wildlife benefit and not thinking about the ecosystem requirements of that grass to be grazed. And that was done to preserve the sorriest land we had. And in this case, we're looking at methodologies to preserve the best land we have, or the best water potential we have. If the communities are going to survive, they're going to have to start focusing on the best water potential or the best recharge potential they have. Because once you pump it down to a baseline level, we're living on recharge. And you can see some examples of that in the area. You go south of Lubbock, some of that area, those wells are very small, and they are pretty much living on a recharge model already. And so it's not like it's a new concept. It's just the concept of how we go about getting that land preserved in a way that is financially viable for the producer and viable for the community. And it gives the community a moment to look at that land. What we're talking is trying to get a 5-year or 10-year CRP contract on that land to help to see what the water table does there, and to figure out where the weak spots are so that they can be addressed, and get the playas modified in such a way that they're working again. Try to improve their functionality.
Right. And on that note, I'm going to give a plug for the Playa Lake Restoration Project that we're doing. We've got a list of about 25 folks that have playas and are interested in, if the funding is there, pursuing and seeing what it would look like to have their playas restored. And we are looking for 25 more. So it's no cost, no commitment. All we need to know is, are you interested if the funding is there? And when we get that list of 50, then we turn that back into the funder, which is the Global Water Challenge through Cargill. And we would appreciate anybody's interest. Get a hold of us at contact sarah-conservation.com, and there'll be a link. End of shameless plug.
Here is the fact. If you look at the cost of getting playas back to functionality and getting grasslands and grass buffers established in those areas, that doesn't mean crop production goes away. But what it does mean, you're improving the quantity and quality of the water going into the aquifer. And that is also, at this point, mathematically the cheapest new water we can bring to the table in the region. And across much of the Great Plains, especially in the small and mid-sized communities, that will be the most cost-effective methodology that they can do.
Well, I think it's not something that people, I feel like until, you've started talking about it, most communities, not sure that they've even been exposed to this idea. And because we've been told, and I think there is still some people that, will say it takes, average playa takes 800 years to recharge. And I mean, just from our anecdotal experience of the people that we've talked to, that it can be way more localized than that. And yeah, you could be, your playa could be one that takes years and years to recharge, but you could also be sitting on top, your playa could be sitting on top of something that's shallower, and your recharge could be quicker than that.
Well, if you look at it like this, if you look at even the large scale data set that comes out every spring from well measurements, usually done in January, from the High Plains Underground Water Conservation District out of Lubbock, and there are years that there are massive declines in specific areas and minor declines in the majority of the area, and small areas that usually have some rise. You take that same data set and you get a wet year here on the plains, and the decline for those years is near zero. It is on a very large scale. If you step back from the picture and look at the macro, it tells you that recharge potential is very viable across the region. And the problem is not that it doesn't recharge. The problem is we haven't optimized recharge, and we are still utilizing this mindset of optimizing the amount of extraction we use to produce a crop or run a town or run an industry to produce a product, whether that be a food product or a non-food product. So when we look at the math on it, the real goal is to get that back in balance, at least enough that the community can be viable.
Because we're talking about water for municipalities, and those municipalities, you can balance that. You can balance that use with recharge.
If you just run the math on numbers of acres it requires, if you look at it you're going to need basically, depending on how you model it, you're going to need somewhere between 2 and 10 acres of rechargeable land per house, and then still incorporate some conservation efforts within the community to minimize waste of water in the community. But if you can, for example, if you have in the area we're at, if we look at what we think our recharge is based on math, and if we can expand that out. So here's an example. I'm going to use Hereford, Texas as an example. That's a model I think about a lot, and I'm involved in. I'm the president of our local economic development corporation, and so I'm in communication with the people that run the town on a regular basis. And they are absolutely there's some concern about long-term water supplies. It's a big concern of our mayor. And it's not that Hereford doesn't have water. Hereford has water. However, it does not have the footprint it needs to go forward. Okay. And if you said, okay, we're going to identify the best 60,000 acres of water for the city of Hereford. Hereford has on the sign about 15,000 residents. Currently, it uses about 5 million gallons a day. 40% of that water goes to the city for homes and operation of the parks and whatnot. 40% of it goes to provide water for our local meat processing facility. And about 20% of it goes, a little under 20% of it goes to support an ethanol facility and its subsequent production of distillers byproducts for feed. And so when we total that up of that 5 million gallons, you do the math on it. If you're using an acre, if you can get the recharge level to where it's between 6 and 10% of annual rainfall, we're in an 18 to 20 inch rainfall zone. You can get it to where you can nearly make a 60,000 acre field work. That's a lot of land for that size. But so we're a little under 100 sections where we're talking about. If you took that 100 sections and you blocked it up and you identified, hey, we're gonna pay these farmers like they're doing in Mexico. We're gonna pay them a couple $100 a year to not irrigate for a period of 5 years. And then at the end of that 5 year period, we're going to purchase those water rights if it's what the community agrees on and people understand the importance of it. It gives us a look to see how that water table reacts, number one. But the other part of it is you could go, if we did either a groundwater CRP program and had USDA help us do it, or the state help us do it, or a combination of the two, that gives some buy-in to the farmers, from the farmers. I think it really, because they're important. Man, they are really important to this culture, this economy.
Oh, that we can't. Exactly.
You got to have them.
You got to
Got to
them.
have them.
And I think that's the thing that was so impressive to me about LaDonna's program was she started with the farmer. She started with the economics of the farm when they started talking about easements, and because she understood what that meant if you took away the income from people, you just couldn't do it without doing huge damage to the economy. Are you a farmer or rancher? Are you raising cattle or bison? Maybe you're feeling the pinch at your local processor or noticing new disposal fees, or you're simply wanting to get more value from every part of your livestock. The Growing Grass Project could be the solution you're looking for. This USDA-funded initiative, led by the American Sustainable Business Institute and the American Sustainable Business Network, along with other half processing, is working to bring value back to cattle and bison producers while also supporting people and the planet. With their generalized regenerative agricultural sourcing specification, GRAS for short, they're helping ranchers verify and market regeneratively raised cattle and bison. And it's not just about the meat. GRAS includes hides and other byproducts, making sure that every part of the animal contributes to profitability. If you're interested, you can start by taking a quick 10-minute screening survey. Qualified participants can receive direct payments, technical support, and even $500 a year for the remaining years of the grant. Ready to see if your operation fits? Head over to grass.org to learn more and to take the first steps. That's grass, GGRASS.org. Grow the value of your livestock while growing a more sustainable future.
They had a meeting in August in Clovis, New Mexico, and there was a gentleman there with the Department of Defense. And he said, we decided to use the tactical strategy of truth. And I love that term. And so the truth was we were not going to have enough water. And the other truth was they had to have farmer buy-in, and it had to be economically viable for them. And so the flip side on it, I'll give you a flip side example of a groundwater CRP. I could take if the farmers would agree to it in Destin County on that 60,000 acres that has yet to be fully identified. It can be tweaked a couple different ways. And we're fortunate we have 60,000 acres that would easily have the right attributes to meet the needs for the community here. Smaller communities would need a little smaller footprint, bigger communities need a bigger footprint. But if you looked at that 60,000 acres, if we could talk our community into utilizing each user group pays their percentage of the deal, and you took $3,000 an acre, which land's gotten more expensive because of inflation. At $3,000 an acre, there's a lot of farmers that would. Is it the peak of what water rights have sold for the region? Absolutely not. Is it a realistic number? It's pretty close. And if you did that over a 15-year period of time, if the industry paid their percentage, which you're talking on that size project, that's $180 million collectively over 15 years. But if the industry, so if the ethanol plant paid $2.4 million a year, and the meat processing facility paid $4.8 million a year on the 4,000 taps in Hereford, and that's how many taps there are, roughly 4,000. And you can do the math; it costs you right at $100 per month on your water bill to buy 60,000 acres of water rights for 15 years. And so, if you do that math, that you would be really near net zero water usage in that 15 years on $100 per tap a month, which is $1,200. However, $1,200 a house comes 15 years is $18,000. Most people would view $18,000 as a lot of money, except for the fact that they realize that their house is there really would take a more significant hit than that if the community ran out of water.
That could demolish somebody's budget, when they're living already below the poverty line. And I know we have a lot. If you look at the USDA statistics on poverty in our area, it's unfortunately very high in these small communities.
Well, and a lot of that has to do with whenever things get harder, the people that have the money to move to Lubbock or move to Amarillo or move to Dallas, they move on. And as you depopulate a town, you end up with a higher and a higher percentage of those that can't afford to leave leaving is not the answer. If you don't reinvest in the community, that just speeds up its demise because you have to have economic activity to pay for all this. There probably are critical mass sizes that will matter to, but in the scheme of water cost, the problem we've run into here is that many people believe that water should be free. Unfortunately, it's not free. And unfortunately, the fuel for pumping the water and transporting the water is more significant than the actual cost of the water rights. Okay. When you look at that, it becomes a situation like when Aubrey Spear was here in Lubbock, and he said at some point we had to make a decision whether the community survives or not. They dealt with their water challenges through rates. He finally said they had to come to this point with, if you can't afford to live here, I'm sorry, move in with a friend or a family member and see if you can make that work. Because we still have to look at the needs of the majority of the community. Like, for example, in our community, I do not know the percentage of people, but I would guess it would probably be close to 10% of our population that would have a problem with that, paying that. And so maybe when that's the case, maybe we need to offset that 10% with the other 90% to make that feasible, but where they have to apply for the grant. So the ones that can afford $110 a month, we're buffering the model and the plan to pay for those that can't.
Right. Because what happens is a lot of those people, that $100 is going to impact are the people that if they leave, you don't have people to do those jobs. that you need those people there to work on the farm, to work in the meat plant, to work in all of these,
Well, to say they